throughout tonight too. Same thing, we're recording, so if you don't want audio capture on the recording, feel free to type your questions in the chat, which is on the side. And we will answer them as we see them come up. And if I miss any, just type it again, and we'll try to make sure it all gets answered. So just to start with, I'm going to share my screen and give a few little overview slides. Like I said, we're not aiming to dive into a lot of detail tonight, other than what maybe is raised for questions. So there's been a lot of information about the NTS, National Training Squad, posted to the NZU website. So if you haven't been there and read through all the documents that have been posted, I encourage you to. There's even an FAQ, which has some common questions and the answers to them there. So first off, oops. I'll start with the first slide. So this happy group was our first selected national training squad. This was the first go at a program that we started in 2019. You might see some of your faces in that photo. This sort of initiative was a new work stream of the New Zealand Ultimate Board as a way to bring more long-term and sustainable high-performance competition for players within New Zealand. So that was going great. And then 2020 happened and COVID canceled a lot of stuff. It canceled Worlds. And we were left with an opportunity, we'll say, to completely shift and change our plans for what we had wanted to do with NTS this year. New Zealand's in a bit of a unique situation in that we probably have more opportunities to do more playing Ultimate this year than other countries, just because we have the abilities to actually get out there and play. Although I guess last weekend or Windy Wellington, excuse that, and fingers are crossed for Chalice City Classic coming up that we get our full 2 days. So as a high performance community committee, we really wanted to make the most of 2021 and not lose what is a year to really build our athletes and our coaches and our volunteers and just this whole program of developing everyone up. So we got together with the coaches from the previous NTS and put together a plan, and that was what we did in late January. And that was all the announcements that came out over the last couple of weeks. So I'm just going to walk through, again, the basics here. So the 2021 National Training Program was announced. We announced 8 national training squads. The 2 that are not listed here are the U20s, just because tonight we're going to focus on the senior squads and the under 24s. So we've got a senior women's, senior mixed, senior men's national training squads, as well as an under 24 women's, mixed, and men's national training squads. Each squad is going to have 56 players selected to it, with 12 reserves as well. So the reserves are there to be able to move up into the main national training squad if and when as needed. So that can be injuries, pullouts, what have you. The purpose also of the squads was that we really just did want to use this year to create more opportunities for players to develop and be challenged and to enter the high performance program pathway. So that's why we have these 6 different NTSs, again, to give people opportunities to play in individual divisions, play in both divisions. We'll get into more of that a bit later. So in addition to sort of these new squads in terms of having a new NTS for each of those, we also have new events. So we've got NTS camps. We're going to have 2-day tournaments. We've been having exhibition matches, which you've likely seen, hopefully, at our last couple of summer series events. And we're going to have another one at Nationals. And we're also doing regional development camps. And so the purpose of these new events is that we're trying to create more opportunities for players to be able to play in high-level games, because obviously we don't have the opportunity to do that in an international setting. And because it's these game times and these game situations where people, the players and coaches, can acquire the mental focus and sort of the soft skills that come with being put into high pressure situations, and this tournament type play. So that's what we're trying to replicate in terms of having this new program of events. Whoops, skipping ahead. So yeah, so in terms of, we've got new squads, new events, and now sort of this new approach. And so when I speak about a new approach, we're talking about it's allowing participation on multiple squads. We've made it so that our focus at this point of the year and the season is on women's and men's, and then we're going to shift into mixed. So that does give an opportunity to play in both women's and mixed, both men's and mixed, that sort of thing. We've got a selection panel as well that's going to be supporting more of a regular induction of talent. So as needed, year round, they'll always be watching, and know that whenever you're playing at a tournament, you could essentially be being considered for adding addition to one of the NTSs at a later point if you're not already on it. So it's just allowing that better sort of flow in between. We've appointed a new director of coaching, Gary Jarvis. Welcome to have, we're lucky to have him be in that role and lend his expertise and knowledge. And he's going to be helping guide and encourage the development of our coaches and our incoming coaches as well, because that's part of the program too. We don't just want to develop players, we want to develop coaches as part of this too. So here is a look at the event schedule, at least between April and September, and this is all up on the website too. We've got dates and we've got locations, and we've got sort of these high-level concepts of what's going to take place at each of these in terms of the development, and there might be more questions about that, the specific details and what's going to happen at each of these events. Some of that is still under discussion. We're still figuring out the details, and we're still leaving that as well up to the coaches. So they are going to have conversations and they're going to develop weekends and events that make sure everyone gets the most value out of them. We wanted to set all the dates and locations up ahead of time so that you had them ready to go and you knew what you were signing up for when you give EOI. So here's our coaches, quick introductions. On the U24 side, we've got Mara, Lee, and Liam. And then on the senior side, we have our returning coaches, Tim, Gary, and Hamish. So speaking of EOIs, the deadline is coming up. It's going to be this Saturday at March, the 13th of March. So get your EOIs in. We really like to see as many players as possible taking this opportunity. It's probably one of the best times to join the NTS because you've got local events happening and lots of different and creative opportunities to be challenged at events. As I said, all the program information can be found on the website, so please go there. We've tried to set it up so it's easy to understand, but if you have any questions or can't find your answer in one of the documents, then just let us know. That's the quick and dirty presentation. So I'm going to stop it there and just see if there are any initial questions from that really quick whirlwind run through. Feel free to either unmute or just type your question in the chat. And or while you're thinking of questions, we did invite people to submit questions ahead of time anonymously. So we can go through some of those, which might spark you to ask follow-on questions, or maybe it is a question that you were interested in asking yourself anyways. So what I'll do is I'm going to paste the question in the chat just so that everyone can see it, and then we will speak to it. So the question that came in advance was, can I be selected for a squad and then choose to not participate in the camp and or one of the tournaments? So I'm wondering, I've done a lot of talking. I'm wondering if maybe one of my fellow HPC members or one of the coaches would like to speak to that.
Sure. The short answer is yes, it's possible, but we want people to try and commit to If you EOI for the mixed NTS, then you should intend to attend the camp and then the tournament. Life happens, and if things pop up, that's the intent behind running a reserve NTS, so that there are people that can replace players that have to drop out for whatever reason. It could just be burnout, but the intent is, if you EOI for it, please make every effort to be able to go to both. But we do have a reserve NTS for that purpose.
Yep, and sort of a follow-on question from that came in the chat from Nick, asking, with 56 players on the squad, is that intention then to have 56 people at each of those events? And yeah, that is the case. And so if for some reason circumstances came up and someone who's on the NTS can't make it, that's another opportunity for someone on the reserves to be called up. Okay. Another question that came in advance, a good one that people will be thinking of, is, so what will you be looking for in players to join the squad, the NTS squad? So one thing I'll just direct people to is on the NZU website, there is a selection policy. And maybe actually if someone, I'm going to share my screen and just show you where to find it. So that it's quite clear, and then I'll maybe leave that open if someone else would like to speak to the high level things about what we're looking for from players. Or I can.
So broadly, the things you would expect people to be considered for. So we listed a small list of things that the coaches, or rather the selectors, would be looking at, including your application, feedback from other coaches, performance at events, that sort of stuff. So in those performance at events, the coaches would be looking for, or selectors, sorry, would be looking for a strong technical skill base, consistent performance of core skills, tactical understanding, physical competencies, mental competencies, potential to improve, and then lastly, positional balance within the squad and team. And this is all listed within the NZU selections policy. I've thrown up the link in the chat there, so feel free to have a look at that.
Cool. If you lose it, go to the NZU website under NZU policies and constitution. I went through this process myself earlier this evening, and then scroll down to national team policies. Got the really important one about national uniforms. Jokes. And here's the NZU selection policy. Okay. Our next question. So this is once you've made it to the squad, questions about how often and how will you make it transparent if and when people may need to be dropped from the squad. Overall, the aim is to do an annual review of players on the NTS, and that'll be the main method of moving people in and out of it. If players are at risk of being removed from an NTS, either due to non-performance, attitude, other reasons, then they'll be given that opportunity or given that information so that they have an opportunity and a chance to rectify and work on things, change performance, change attitude, that sort of thing. Overall, the coaches have the responsibility for making those decisions and interacting with players. Once the squads and teams are selected, that's up to them. So I'd say if you want to speak about that more, then those would be questions and discussions to have with your coaches.
Question came in from Reebok. Are there trials, or is all the selection from upcoming events? Great question, Reebok. Basically, for this instance of the NTS, we're working with a really short time frame to try and get things up and running. We've got to get a selections panel, then that panel needs to make calls about who to select and whatnot. And our first event is in April. So we even before that, we've got to get people to buy plane tickets to these sort of out of region areas. So we've got a really short time frame to get that up and running. So basically this year selections are based off of just recommendations from club coaches or leadership. The selectors are being encouraged to reach out to club leadership. There's also a form online for club leadership to actually actively reach out and give feedback on their players. Performance. The second thing is performance at NZU sanctioned tournaments, Chalice City Classic this weekend, and then nationals as well in the next few weekend. Previous NTS performance and attendance record, and then performance at regional and local events, including, often we'll have regional development camps. And then we had those U24 camps back in November. So those sorts of things. And then of course the EOI. So that's what the selections are going to be based off of.
There's another question in the chat. If you can't make all events or major events, will you only be considered for the reserve player pool? I wouldn't think so, because like as we said, if there's the aim is for people to be able to attend any event, all events if possible. But I think it's on the onus to be upfront and say if you can't attend certain ones, and then again, it would be up to the selectors to make that decision. I think I wouldn't want people to not EOI because they can't attend all events if they're just missing one of them, maybe. I think the purpose is to attend all of them. They're there for you, and they're there to make the NTS better as well. And so, but if you can't attend, just be upfront and state that in your AOI and let the selectors decide. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that.
Yeah, just to be clear there, as far as this year goes, for each of the NTS squads, you're really only talking about 2 events. So you're talking about a camp and a tournament event. The development camps are separate, and that's so as far as your EOI, if you can't make the say for women's or men's, if you can't make the one-day weekend in Anzac weekend and the 4-day tournament in when is it, August or September, no, sorry, May, then there's not much point in applying, because those are the 2 main events for the NTS this year. I mean, you could be listed on a list somewhere saying that you made the NTS, but you wouldn't be at any of the events, so you'd fall right off the roster. The whole point is participation to improve, to increase the player base. So yeah.
So we have another sort of follow-on question about players moving in and out of the team. So in terms of revisiting it once a year, how is that different from the current campaign-based model?
I'll take this one if you want, Jenna.
Yeah.
So it might not be majorly different for the U24s, but for the seniors, Worlds campaigns have happened every 4 years. And in between those campaigns, there has been very little continued activity at the high performance level in terms of a national team. So the change we're trying to make is to run these NTS events every single year. Okay, so regardless of whether Worlds is this year, next year, or last year, the NTS will be involved in some national high performance events. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's really good, Tim. Just to follow on from that as well is, remember, this is a work in progress for all of us, and it's going to be refined as we go. We're taking learnings from last year and trying to apply them this year, and we'll do the same in future. The whole goal is to keep and build the elite base in New Zealand and just try and get it bigger and stronger, but also improve the quality by, the more competition we get at that level, and then we're going to have to work more. The challenge is for the players to push the selectors to have a harder job, and to push the coaches to have a harder job by getting more players and better players in there. So yeah, we look forward to that.
Okay, another question that came in advance was, will there be separate masters squads? No, not this time. More people need to get old, I think. And so another question that came in advance, most of the level of ultimate all the way up to WIF-DIF offer open rather than men's. So will women be allowed to play in the open/men's division at an NTS, provided that the female players have an equal level of skill? Coaching. I think we didn't see any problem with that.
I'll jump in here. I would be disappointed to lose a female player to the open division, but I'm sure that Gary would welcome any player who was up to the standard.
Yeah, that's the right answer, Tim. We're absolutely open to the idea, but we're also trying to promote and develop women's ultimate as much as we can. So we hope our elite women help lead the women's division here as well.
A question might have come, Gary, from the camp we had over at Martinborough, where we did accept, it was just a men's only camp, and we accepted, we turned it into an open camp.
Well, that just highlights my attitude to it was the Taniwha camp, and we invited all players of a certain standard, and I think the same goes. The difference is here. There's opportunities like at the tours, as we know, we've got a number of women that play in the open division now, even though we're still calling it women's and men's. I don't know if you know the history of where WAM came from. It was my wife that actually coined it when she was running the NZU website, and just came up with the acronym. And we, at that stage, were trying to encourage the number of women playing. This was back in about 90, I can't remember. It was nationals, maybe in Palmerston North, and we had a number of women the elite women that wanted to play in the open division, but we wanted to establish a women's division. And if we'd let them play in the open, there wouldn't have been a women's division. So we actually had to make the hard call to split into men's and women's, and got exactly the same response from some elite women that we're getting now. But the difference is, I mean, the benefit of it is what you see now in having women's ultimate happening. So there's certain times when, you have to step back to step forward. So that was where that came from. But I think we're at the point now where we've gone back to open and women's in our tour events, which is great. And but maybe still at NTS, we want to try and encourage women to participate in women's. Does that sound about right, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, the guys can't compete in the women's division, so I'm interested in getting all the high level talent we can involved in the women's division. So in saying that, it is the players' option. We can't force the issue, but I fully encourage all women to participate.
We have a question about costs. Aside from flights to the training events and tournaments, is there any cost to being on the NTS?
So easy answer is yes. We have to pay for fields. We're also keeping in mind that our coaches and managers and selectors are all volunteers, we're going to be paying for their flights and whatnot. But everything's aimed to be somewhat cost shared across the people there. So right now the estimated costs are 250 for camps and 400 for tournaments. We're still working through the budget for each of those because we're still getting final prices from like the venues and that sort of stuff. And that payment is going to cover flights, accommodation, some food, hopefully a reversible training singlet, and venue costs. So it's pretty comprehensive, but we're looking into getting like deals with accommodation and billeting where possible and that sort of stuff to make it as affordable as possible for players.
Just with that, the biggest unknown at the moment is also COVID implications on flights. The fact that the number of reduced flights is putting the price up. So the sooner we can get things underway, the better.
Cool. Questions are coming in. And so one about, we've talked about rotating players in and out of the squads, but plans for rotating and moving coaches in and out of positions in the future. Love the coaching choices. Nick says that the current, just wanting to wonder this for transparency and thinking about the future.
And I can take that one.
Sure.
Yeah, so the appointments are made at the moment, basically until the coaches step down. That's the sort of the idea of it, is a permanent position. But we intend to basically review those every 2 years. So the 24s and the under 20s coaches, that review will happen after each world cycle. And for the senior coaches, that'll happen halfway and again at the end of the world cycle. So that gives those coaches an opportunity to step aside as well. Obviously, if someone puts their name forward now for Worlds in 2020, when's the next one? 8, 6, 4, whatever it is, 4 years away, that's a big commitment for those coaches. So yeah, 2 yearly reviews basically.
So we're just on 9 o'clock now. It's great that there's been this many questions. I'm happy to continue on, but if people need to drop off, again, we are recording this so you can watch what you may have missed tomorrow, but maybe we'll just continue on because there's just a few more and a couple more in the ones sent in advance. So a question back to the budgets. Now with this expected cost of attending these, the WAM season events, the new NTS camps, and then also the mixed season tournaments, is that too much on players? That might be a question for players. It may range depending on a person's situation.
Yeah, I mean, the word here used is expected. Ryan has a good point, but different people will expect to pay different amounts of money. Different people will expect to go to different levels of a sport. With any additional opportunity, whether it's this one or a hat tournament, you're going to have to pay some amount of money for it. If it's in your hometown, it's easier to pay for. If it's out of town, it's harder to pay for. It's about your ability to pay for it. We're trying to make it as equal for all players and reduce costs as much as we can. But yeah, it's for everything in life, there's a bit of a trade-off, and oftentimes that's financial. If you have any thoughts, Ryan, about like what we can do to reduce cost, then by all means, please do send those through. But we understand this is another opportunity, but no one has to take this opportunity.
One thing to add to that, Sam, is this is your best and cheapest opportunity to play high-level Ultimate, given that there's no international competition. So anyone that had aspirations of going overseas for any Ultimate, wherever it be, I guarantee it would be a lot dearer than any one of the tournaments you'll attend here. And we're trying to raise the level so that it's that sort of return that you're getting from the tournament. That's why we're having one of the events as more like a tournament. It was Ian's idea, which is great, a great concept where we actually get the top players together, and you're going to get a chance to play with some colleagues over the weekend as excuse me, as a pickup team, but have a chance to play together and play several games together, not as your club team, but as a top team within the country. And I think we should end up getting some pretty good quality ultimate out of that.
Nick's got a follow-on question here that's quite related to that in terms of reimbursements and payments to staff. And right now, the current budget for these NTS events is including reimbursements for the coaches and managers, I believe. So that is being factored into this current run of things, as they are non-playing volunteers. They're not necessarily getting the same thing out of this that players are getting. So right now it does include that. And it's something that we want to look for. I think Ian can talk a bit more to the budget of NZU and how it's quite difficult to allow money out of NZU's broad budget just towards HPC, which is a small subset of player population. So right now it has to be internally funded, especially with a very tight budget due to the lack of events for a long period of time due to the COVID lockdowns.
Yes,
Nick,
I guess Nick's question is, yeah, he's clarified to say, is it more than just reimbursement for the staff? And certainly we'd love to do that. We'd love to look at ways of doing that. As Sam said, it's not going to come out of the NZU player levy budget. That's pretty clear that the members have said don't spend our levies on purely high performance outcomes. So we need to look at external opportunities to raise our income, and that would allow that to happen.
this kind of fits in another question that came in that I'll just post in the chat too. And so someone asked whether the NTS season will cover other aspects of player development, like be that stretching, fitness, diet, and those sorts of plans. And that is a long-term goal, is that, you know, once we've got this sorted and got the squads in place and things sort of rolling, at least from a high performance committee perspective, we did want to look into other ways of offering resources and guidance and things for players that can contribute to their performance plan. And so that includes those things mentioned in the chat, but also mental support and balancing, you know, work-life balance with competing at levels, financial management, how to, you know, budget and accommodate if you do want to go to every single tournament, how does that work so that you can manage that? So all these sorts of other aspects of playing in the sport beyond just staying fit and being on the field and having the skills. So that's definitely something that we want to develop and be able to provide to players. But that will take a bit of time and calling on other expertise to help with developing those resources. But that's definitely a goal because it's all part of the package.
Just to add to that, Jenna, with my director of coaching hat on, the intention is also to help try and develop the coaches through the NTS. So we'll have as many of our top coaches there as possible, as well as our next tier of coaches, to try and develop them. Give them a chance to work with the top players, and then hopefully that'll be a chance to disseminate more of that information that you're talking about there, and everybody can be part of that process.
The questions about finances, I think, are really good. And it brings up a good discussion, which I've often wondered about in terms of Ultimate. If anyone's really interested in trying to start up a program that can help players that are not as well off, and it's tougher to go to something that costs $250 or $400, like if somebody's interested in really piloting a program and doing that, I'd be interested to like help out with that. It's $50 is not the same to everyone. $50 is a lot of money to some people, and for other people it's just a drop in the bucket. And so this is like a really important issue. If you're passionate about that, we could use somebody to start a program, because it does take a lot of resources to do that sort of thing, and money is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. So it'd be good to have somebody dedicated just to that.
I'll just add my 2 cents here. I've been through a couple of campaigns, so I understand, you know, the cost of international ultimate is high. The one thing I've learned is I would much rather first and foremost know that people are enthusiastic and want to participate at this level. That's the most important thing. We want people to be putting EOIs in and saying they want to attend these things, and then tell us if there's a financial hurdle, okay? Because then we can actually do something about it. Not putting an EOI in because of the financial stress doesn't help us address the problem. And as Sam's pointed out, it is a problem the community has, and there is something that the community can do about it. But if we don't know, it makes it very difficult. So I hope that is clear. But yeah, I'd much rather people put an EOI in regardless of whether they can afford it or not, and let us do something about the cost later.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that gives us things that to take to NZU and say, see, there is opportunities and challenges and things that we need to address. So let's work on it. Cool. Another question that came in just regarding mixed NTS and having 28 from each gender. Looking at sort of the camps, I guess, in the tournaments, if that's going to be broken down into 4 teams of 7 from each gender, there's a risk of overload due to not a full line swap in terms of the games. So playing 4-3, 2 points in a row. Would the coaches consider a 4-8 or a 4-9 of each gender to closer mimic a world setting? Interesting.
I think that's a great idea and a great comment, and I think we should probably take that on board and look to, I think when we go down to just looking at the numbers so far we've received for mixed, because we're only looking at half as many players, I think we may be able to do that. Not sure about what the others think, but I think that would be a great idea to increase the numbers.
From my perspective, I guess just the camp itself would probably stick to the 56-person limit, but the event I would happily stretch it out to cater for the teams more so, because those events are team-based rather than squad-based, if that makes sense.
Yep. I mean, as we said, it's still all the details are all under development, to be developed. So yeah, good feedback, whoever put that in. I think we'll take it on board and have more discussions about it, because we've got a little bit of time up our sleeve for the mixed one. We've just got to get the men's and women's happenings first.
Question in the chat from Charles: what would the final cutoff day? What would the final day cutoff be for the next 224 squad? In terms of age? I think Nick. Do the U24 coaches want to answer that? Sorry, I don't know. I'd have to go look it up.
I presume you're meaning for our NTS. So how does under 24s normally work? The end of the calendar year?
Yeah, so for this year we're looking, so for the year, I guess, for 2021, if you were eligible for the Worlds during 2021, which means that your cutoff date was 90, I think it's 98, you're still eligible. So if you're born 98 or later, you're fine. But then I guess once this year is over, and that's the end of the U24 cycle, essentially, we'd be looking for the next one, which you'd have to be born 2000 or later. But for now, the cutoff date is 98. So for this current U24 EOI.
Lee, wouldn't we do it, since we're running New Zealand under 24s annually, wouldn't it increase by 1 year each year rather than 2 for the under 24 cycle, for the world cycle? See what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
If that's
if you're not eligible for under 24s next year for Worlds, and you've only got, if you're going to age up this year, you might as well play up. Is what I mean.
I mean, my understanding is that the under 20s normally looks to head to the next Worlds. Ian can correct me if I'm wrong. So I imagine under 24s would do the same thing. So we'd go up 2 years in line with the next Worlds, but we can probably cross that bridge next year.
Luckily, the EOI form has a birth date field, so fill that out and we'll figure it out.
Okay, it's another one HPC will grapple with then. Just the difference is that we're doing annual under 24s in New Zealand as opposed to 2 yearly Worlds under 24s. So that's something for HPC to decide.
I think the key thing is put in your EOI and we'll make sure that you get in the right squad.
But no, that's good. It's Sam's great point. I mean, these are raising things to be worked out. So that's what this year's for. Okay, one more question in terms of what had been sent in advance. And this kind of goes back to coaching. And the person suggested, would NZU board consider having people put their names forward? And then the NTS player pool votes for the coaching roles. Just that having a select group of people, and I assume that means the HPC, choose a coach, doesn't always pick the right coach for the job. Fair enough. I think the biggest challenge there is getting people to put their names forward for consideration.
I'm not fully sure that a democratic approach always gets the right person for the job either. That's the first thing I'll say, but that's a possibility. We've also got this new position, the director of coaching role that Gary's taken up. And we're trying to work on pathways for the development of coaches. And this again creates more of a pathway up rather than just, oh, I've got a little bit of coaching experience, but nobody knows me. I should apply for this. And then you just, no, turn down because Warren's still coaching there after all these years. So basically there's steps to step up to that level, hopefully, as Gary starts to flesh out this role and see where we can get more opportunities to get better and more opportunities, for instance, like to lead one of these teams at the championship events or be an assistant coach under Gary. There's more of a pathway there. So yeah, I think maybe doing a democratic approach with the NTS for choosing coaches is a possibility, but I'm not sure you're going to get the right candidates doing that either. You might just get the loudest people.
And I think we've got to remember that the coaching staff for all of the national teams are volunteers as well. So it might not be the best practice to vote somebody in who's not really willing to take on the role.
I also think everyone who is a coach and has coached, we're all learning as well. So I would think that as a part of this new annual NTS process, it'll give us more opportunities to develop. And I know that there's generally a feedback process at the end of campaigns. And so I would hope that this is also built into the annual process. So then the coaches that you do have will have more opportunity to develop and learn prior to getting to the full kind of intensity of what can be at Worlds.
So another follow-up comment to that. So what to what Liam said is long-term plan for coaches to continue being volunteers. How long do we want to look at? I'd say no. From my perspective, it would be great to reimburse and remunerate in some sort of way to acknowledge that time and expertise that they're lending towards it. But that could be quite a number of years into the future. But that's the goal. I mean, yeah, I'd love to pay people to value what they're contributing. I think that's good to do. On that note, I know that NZU, and Ian can maybe speak to this, you know, like we're always approaching other organizations and foundations for, we apply to grants and to funding and that sort of thing. But there may be more opportunities having this high performance program to apply to different groups and foundations for funding opportunities. If anyone has any connections or suggestions or places that we could go to apply for grants for either short-term or long-term programs and initiatives like this, please let us know. If anyone works for government, please let us know.
Yeah, I mean, look, New Zealand ultimately has to balance a whole bunch of different opportunities. If we were to pay people, I imagine, you know, things like a tournaments person has been mooted from the National Tournament Review as being a position that we would like to see paid. If we could pay a person to look after sort of the role of the high performance committee and be the direction across high performance, that's another option. So there's a lot of other ways that NZU can spend its money as opposed to just paying coaches. Obviously, it's a great position to be in, but I would imagine the money for that would have to come externally, either through sponsorship, specifically aimed at the high performance program, to generate the right money from the right pot to pay coaches. We'd love to.
Okay, that's taken us to the end of all the questions that were submitted in advance. So I'll give another minute or two for anyone to type any other questions that they might have in the chat, or feel free to unmute and speak up. And I'll maybe offer any last words from any of the coaches who would like to say anything. Any parting words or encouragement to have people EOI? I hope everyone on the call here has EOI'd or plans to. Okay, again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in, slipping them in this last closing remarks, but we'll get this recording up within the next 24 hours. We'll publish the Q A, both of the ones that were submitted you know, in advance, and then the ones that we discussed tonight. Publish that to the NZU and the player representatives Facebook groups, and send out to the NTS mailing list as well. So that's everyone who's EOI'd to date and anyone who was on the NTS previously. So if you want to get that summary, EOI, and then you'll get it emailed to you. Yeah, and so you've got the next few days to go look at all that information on the NZU website. Look at the dates for the camps, double check your calendar, and then go submit that EOI, and hopefully we will see you on the weekend at Chalice City playing. And if you have any questions about any of this and follow up, look for one of the coaches or look for Sam. He'll be helping out on the fields, I'm sure, and then attend the exhibition game as well. Play in it if you can, or go and cheer on the people who are playing in it, because that is one of the ways that we're trying to just create some buzz and create some awareness and build some excitement around what the NTS is. So please help support that. Thanks again. If you have any other further questions, just pop us an email or comment on the Facebook page. And thanks for coming. This was great. I'm glad that we were able to answer some of your questions, and thanks for spending your evening with us. Have a good night, everyone, and we will see you on the fields. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Jenna. That was great. Well hosted.